The story starts with a line saying hired fighters who do not die are third rate. Next we see a knight with his sword. It is explained why they make so much money. The reason is because they are expected to gladly die for their boss. Hearing this kind of silly talk from bosses, every single day something is being poured into a liquid. A hand tosses the liquid from a small bottle onto the fire. The person talking wonders what more he could possibly do. In that moment we see a man sitting alone, thinking this is the hired fighter life. The main character then says all the nobles are truly the same. He complains when they need them they promise land and even big titles. But in the end they all break their word with silly reasons as if the whole thing was planned. Standing on a fort wall, the man says what they just told him takes the cake. Then with a mean smirk he wonders if he heard the words right. View pulls back showing our character and another man up on the wall. He talks to the other man who looks to be a guard leader. The leader glares at him and says he did not hear wrong. He wants the hired fighter to meet his end. Jake asks if the noble forgot who he is, but the other confirms he is the captain of the Fang hired fighter group. With that Jake cracks a smile thinking it is a joke since the man knows who he is. He keeps saying otherwise there would be no way he could give an order like that. The order would be for a simple hired fighter like him to die fighting like a noble knight. We see the scene from behind Jake who stares down the leader in front of him. The leader then seems to think again about his words. He admits he spoke too fast. The leader says sorry if he made Jake misunderstand, but the hired fighter gets suspicious about the word misunderstand. The noble explains he only wanted to give the hired fighter captain a final job. Jake listens closely while the leader explains because of their many losses the odds are heavily against them. The city is being destroyed in the middle of flames. A group of knights is shown. The leader keeps explaining the situation. He says the rebel blades are at the throat of House Crawford which defended this place for years. The noble admits with nowhere left to retreat his words came out in a rush. Jake then smiles and says he completely understands the leader's situation. With a mean grin he comments given the situation it makes perfect sense. The person talking thinks it is time to run. It is a shame as the noble was once skilled and one of the more fair ones. Jake thinks about this final job and wonders if they will make an escape path before the final pay, but the leader tells the job is simple. The next day the rebels will attack with all they have. He wants Jake and his men to hold the enemies until his lord can safely escape. If that is not possible, he asks them to fight by his side at least until he himself dies in battle. To get him to do it, the noble offers a large red jewel as pay for the service. The noble says the jewel would cover costs for 3 years, but Jake suddenly attacks him driving his sword into him. Shocked, the leader asks what on earth the hired fighter thinks he is doing. Jake replies angrily, he is the one who should be asking that. If the noble thought he was a fool, he yells this order is basically for them to serve as human shields for the noble's escape. Jake ends saying even if they fought they would only buy a little time. They are being thrown away so the lord can run. Jake questions the plan and asks what would happen if they pulled off a miracle. The leader looks at Jake and starts talking about the nature of hired fighters. He says they are hired fighters, not knights, so the enemy would not chase them after their death. The main character gives a mocking laugh. He says that would perhaps happen if the world worked the way it should. With a mean smile, he reminds the noble his hired fighter group is well known. He explains to the enemies his group is a hated foe they swore to wipe out at any cost. The scene then changes to a forest. A knight is coughing while another watches him from far away. Suddenly, a mysterious hand grabs the arm of the getting better knight. The soldier is dragged behind a tree and attacked. Knights walk up in the back. Next, we see the knight being violently hit by a surprise attack. His friends watch in shock and confusion, not understanding what is going on. It is then shown the attacker is Jake. He says coldly this is an ambush. One of the knights yells in despair they are not their own troops, but the Fang hired fighter band. A noble on a horse says they are dressed up using the armor of their fallen friends. He shouts angrily the hired fighters do not have an ounce of honor. Jake moves fast and attacks him, giving him no time to react to the blow. After a quick moment, the noble is already on the ground, completely beat by the main character. We see Jake's cold set look from under his bloody helmet. Back now, the jewel is on the ground. Jake reminds the leader how many leaders he has already taken out. He glares at the noble and says the enemies are more interested in finishing them off than the lord. The leader grits his teeth, clearly upset with the situation. Then Jake blames him, saying he was counting on that too, planning to pull all the attention onto them. The noble replies with a serious look all he asks is for the job to be done. He continues and threatens the hired fighter, saying if he says no, he will have to take him out and take command. With that threat, the main character jumps back, getting away from the leader on the wall. Jake stares at him in anger and says he thought he was different, but he is actually the worst kind of trash. The noble then turns around and offers real apologies for his words, but Jake replies there is no need for apologies and that this works out for him. The hired fighter explains he can deliver the leader's head to the enemies camped out there without feeling bad. The noble asks if he plans to do that to save his own life. Jake confirms he would love to do that and run, but the leader sees the hired fighter has already made sure they cannot simply walk away. The captain then says he will do what he can until the end. If they deliver 2 heads, the enemies will be happy. The leader is confused by the number 2 and asks if to save his men. He wonders if Jake is planning to offer his own head as part of the deal. The main character explains every one of his men was dragged into that hired fighter life by. He keeps saying they trusted him and followed him, so he needs to take the blame. With his sword in hand, the man calls himself their captain, ready for whatever comes. The noble watches him with a look of respect for his leader's stance. Then he lets out a laugh and agrees with the hired fighter captain's words. The leader ends by saying that is the true meaning of leading other people. The leader is sorry about the situation. He says if his lord was not Zara Crawford, things would be different. So he then says he wishes Jake had been his lord instead of the current one. After hearing those words, the hired fighter captain moves fast in the noble's direction. With an angry and set look, he gets ready to give a final blow. The noble, for his part, stands still, seeming to accept his end before the coming attack. He then asks Jake not to forgive him for what he did and for what he became. The main character keeps his look fixed and cold as he keeps his attack against the leader. The noble is hit and thinks things turned out as he feared. The difference in power was too big. He thinks about the unfairness of skill and accepts his end at the hands of the hired fighter cap. Hurt Jake thinks he told his men to run if he did not return. He can leave without worry. He thinks he was always ready for this kind of end. But he still has one question. In his final moments, he wonders how far he could have gone if he had the same chances as the nobles. Everything goes dark. A faraway voice asks him to wake up from his deep sleep, but the scene changes to a rich room. A young man with orange hair asks someone in the bed to wake up. The blonde person in the bed slowly opens his eyes. He asks, confused, who that boy is. He looks at his own hand, which is now pale and soft with a fancy sleeve. The boy shakes him, desperately yelling for him to wake up. This leaves him even more shocked. Suddenly, he is slapped across the face. He is completely lost, wondering what happened. Annoyed, he questions who would hit someone out of nowhere. While the boy asks him to calm down, the main character, now in the body of a young blonde man, sits up in bed. He is called Young Master Lucien. Completely shocked by the situation, the main character can only ask what's going on. He then sits up in the rich bed and looks around, trying to figure out where he is. Looking at his own hands, he feels something is very wrong with his body. He wonders where his rough, scarred hands from his time as a hired fighter went. Now his hands are clean and soft like a young noble's. He does not know them. Meanwhile, the boy who woke him up starts crying at the bedside, making everything more confusing. He thinks the kid just slapped him, and now he is crying like the world is coming to an end. The helper sobs in relief, saying it is a blessing the young master is alive. He thought he had died. He keeps explaining if the master had died, he would be punished, and it would be a huge problem for the house. The former hired fighter wonders what kind of nonsense the kid has been saying since he woke up. He thinks about the terms personal helper, young master, and house. He sees none of it makes sense to him. More than that, he is totally sure he died in that battle in a way no one could have saved. He then touches his own neck, wondering how his head can still be on his body. In the quiet of the rich room, he starts putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Putting all the information and what he has seen so far together, he gets to one amazing end. He gets out of bed, seeing somehow he ended up inside the body of a total stranger. And not just any stranger, but a youth with a face he thinks is very good looking. The main character then walks toward a large mirror to get a better look at his new look. Looking at his face in the mirror, he notices the noble feel. He is now part of the high-class people. Seeing the richness of the room, he sees this noble's family seems to have a lot of money. The main character decides he first needs more information. He remembers the helper's name is Hans, so he calls Hans over to ask some questions. The startled helper quickly agrees. Lucien goes to the mirror and asks what year they are in, but Hans thinks he is still sleepy from the medicine. The helper says it is the imperial year 846. This leaves the main character shocked. He saw this as 15 years before his death. He wonders if he truly went back to the past. Trying to calm himself, he thinks he cannot freak out over every little thing that happens. He decides to focus on what needs to be done first. He turns to his personal helper, Hans. With a scary look, he asks Hans if he woke up today with a wish to die. This terrifies the boy. He questions how a simple helper dared to put hands on his master's body without permission. Lucien asks if the house rules changed while he was out. He demands an answer. Then with a serious look, he asks the most important question. He wants to know who he is. Hans is completely shocked and speechless by his master's question. The helper bows desperately, begging forgiveness for being rude and losing his cool earlier. He reveals his master's name is Lucien Valdec, the third son of the great House Valdec. Hearing the name, the main character is surprised and thoughtful about the news. The flag with the family mark is shown. He sees he knows that name. He wonders if they're talking about that famous and strong House Valdec. House Valdec is a noble family that helped the empire for years. It is a high-class family that works directly next to the emperor. The power they had is almost on the same level as the royal family itself, being a true great house. The main character thinks he actually knows that house well because 15 years in the future, he reveals that House Valdec was the place where he worked for years as a simple guard. Now, after dying in battle, he wakes up and finds he is the third son of that very house. Unable to believe the funny twist of the situation, he thinks this must be a big joke from fate. He thinks throughout his life, because of his low and poor start, the former hired fighter had to take every kind of hard thing the world threw at him. And now, after everything he went through, he gets this kind of unique and surprising chance. He remembers his last question about how far he could have gone if he had the chances of a noble. He decides if this is what fate wants, he will take the challenge with everything he has. So with a new will, he opens the room's windows, letting the sunlight stream in. He says he will show everyone how far he can go and how he will live this new life. The view then focuses on the huge and rich Valdek family home in the daylight. Walking through the halls with hands, he thinks this is Archduke Valdek's property. He thinks he has seen many places as a hired fighter, but this is by far the most over the top of all. And above all, it is the place he will have to get used to as fast as possible. However, as he walks through the home, he sees something still bothers him quite a bit. He notices the strange way the helpers keep looking and whispering about him since earlier. The main character feels the looks he gets from them are anything but normal. Something is wrong. He asks Hans if it is his imagination. But the helper tells since he shut himself away, the young master has not seen anyone besides him for 1 year and 2 months. This leaves the main character stunned. The main character wonders what kind of story this is. What drove the young man to lock himself away for so long? He thinks nobles think differently, but in this house it would not be possible to act as one pleased. That is because the man who protects the empire with strict rules, Archduke Sigund, is here. Former hired fighter ends. There is no way that man would simply watch his son rot in his room. At this, he thinks either Lucien was a problem child or there was a reason for the Archduke to ignore it. He decides until he finds out what happened he would avoid meeting the Archduke. But someone stops him. An older man walks up and says the report on his getting better was true. He says he could not be happier to see young Master Lucien after 1 year. He then asks if Lucien has any trouble moving. The main character knows him. He remembers this was Chief Butler Edwin, who entered the home as a hostage when he was young. His skill got him the job of house manager. He is the Archduke's right-hand man. Lucien thinks this is not good as he has run into the person he most wanted to avoid. The only thing he can count on is that it has been 1 year since Edwin last saw Lucien. In that case, he decides he will just have to put on a show and pretend to be the real young master. To do this, he decides he will copy the most noble person he knows. With a smile, he thanks Butler Edwin for his care. Trying to seem natural, he keeps up the act, saying thanks to everyone's care he has gotten better quite well. Lucien explains he came out to see the house. It was lucky to run into the butler right away, and Sonny asks if there have been any problems in the family while he was not there. Edwin smiles and replies House Valdek is well and doing well. He is happy to see him well too. Lucien smiles and says with Edwin guarding the place there could not be problems. He thinks the butler did not suspect a thing. He then turns to leave, saying he will return feeling peaceful because he is tired from having gone out for the first time in a long time. But the butler stops him and asks the young master to forgive his boldness at that moment. He then asks Lucien to put off his return for an instant. The main character turns around surprised by the request. The butler tells with a serious look someone wishes to see him at this moment. The main character feels uneasy because he already thinks who the person wanting to meet him is. The scene changes and we see Lucien in a large office before a man sitting at a desk. It is shown the person who wanted to see him was Archduke Sigmund himself, his father. The young master stands quietly before his father's big desk. The Archduke then talks to Lucien Valdek. He says he will ask him a direct question. With a cold, deep look, the man asks his son how he is still alive. The question echoes in the main character's mind, who does not understand the reason for that shocking question. The feel in the office becomes very tense after the Archduke's surprising question. The main character is confused and replies he is not sure what his father means by that. The leader of House Valdek then says he was willing to ignore certain acts of his son. He tells he ignored the fact Lucien used his mother's death as an excuse to be spoiled. But he says in the end the young man crossed the line. Locking himself away for 1 year was not enough. The Archduke blames him for treating his own life lightly and even trying to throw it away. The former hired fighter is in shock and tries to ask what he is talking about, not understanding the blame. He then remembers Hans crying and sees the crying was because the real Lucien tried to end his own life. The main character then remembers the scene of the helper crying and understands the reason for such despair. He tries to explain himself to his father, but the Archduke stops him and tells him to stop stalling. The man demands Lucien right away say what he has hidden in his small heart. The Archduke blames him for trying to put sleeping pills in his own father's mouth. Stunned, Lucien hears the blame that he wanted to drug everyone. He is left without a reaction. At that moment, he finally understands why he has no memories of Lucien from his past life. He remembers as a guard 15 years ago he worked in the house. But that boy, the third son of the Valdek family, was actually already dead at that time. The person talking then formally tells us about Grand Duke Sigmund Valdek. It is shown he has 4 children, and each of them is from a different mother. During his 10 years as a guard, the main character met the other 3 children and their mothers, but he never saw young Lucien or his mother even once. It turns out the boy's mother had died young due to a strange sickness. Not long after, Lucien himself followed her to the grave for no clear reason. At the time, the former hired fighter thought the 2 of them were just weak, but that was not the truth. His mother's death and his shaky spot in the family was too much for the child to take. In the end, desperate, he chose to take an almost deadly amount of sleeping pills. He only wanted to get his father's attention, but did not count on the weakness of his body. After 1 year alone, he could not fight the effect of the medicine on his system. With that, he simply ended up dying alone in his dark lone room. The main character thinks the Archduke is being quite fair about the situation. He thinks no matter how strong he is still a father and must be hurting inside. But the former hired fighter quickly sees it is not the time to feel bad for someone else. He is the one about to be thrown off the cliff. His father made it clear it was his last chance. That was a final warning. The young noble can already hear the sound of something breaking. It was the sound of cracks forming all over his golden future he had barely got. He knows if he says a single word that does not please the Archduke, all will be lost. At best, he would be sent to a faraway church as a priest forever, or he would be dragged to a frozen land to fight beasts and live like a nobody. But the main character will not take that because this is a new life he barely managed to grab. He will not let a family drama ruin this precious path that lies ahead of him. So he talks to his father and says since he asked him to be honest, he will do so. The young man truly says sorry for hurting the Valk name and for causing so much worry. He takes the blame without excuses. He says he will take any punishment his father thinks is right. The Archduke thinks for a moment and says saying that now will not change what is already done. He then looks at his son and asks if it would not be good for him to simply be happy. Lucian is confused, and the father repeats what is done in the past cannot be undone. Because of that, the life that was saved from the edge should not be tied to the past anymore. The view focuses on the main character's boots as he listens to his father's words. With a new will, he says he plans to stop chaining his life to the past. He smiles and says he will live truly for the future. He asks his father for a word of help. The young man keeps saying a sorry son should be truly forgiven by his parents. Also, he says parents in turn should gladly hug that sorry son. Butler Edwin watches everything from far away and thinks the change in his master is unbelievable. He felt something had changed in the young man, but this act was more than he expected to see. Edwin wonders if that is really the same young Master Lucian he knew before. The one who used to shrink and run away from everything now showed great confidence. Meanwhile, father and son keep staring at each other in a tension-filled quiet in the office. The Archduke then breaks the quiet and asks how his son dares to lecture him on a father's duty. We see the face of the leader of House Valg, who looks furious at the boy's boldness, and says he has truly lived long enough to have seen everything. The main character sees his risky plan worked. He is relieved by his father's reaction. With a small smile, he thinks to himself his acting worked perfectly. Sweating a little, he celebrates the answer was not to bow down, but to face the situation straight on. He knew the Archduke likes a wild fighter much more than a timid mouse. That was the Grand Duke he knew from his past life as a simple guard at the home. Father says his son came back from the edge and even learned to be bold. Then the Archduke asks directly what Lucian Valdek plans to do from now on. The young man closes his eyes for a moment and replies first of all he needs to do one thing. He plans to fix his ruined body. After that, we see a picture of him as a swordsman. We see the picture of a knight with his shining sword who seems to be an idea for the main character. With a new trust, Lucian says his plan is to learn to use the sword correctly. The Archduke questions his choice, and the young man admits his body is weak, but he will figure it out. His father watches him in quiet, seeming not sure but still curious about his son's change. The leader of House Valdek says the boy talks a good game, but words are not everything. He keeps saying they will soon see if all that is just empty talk without real stuff. Next, the Archduke orders the butler to bring that thing back to the young master. Butler explains a few nice words do not mean as much as what he is about to get. Lucian gets a little uneasy and confused, not understanding what his father and the butler are planning. Edwin bows and says he understood the order and will set up for that right away. The main character wonders what this thing they talk about could be. The scene changes to the outside of the home, where some men are carrying boxes from a carriage. We see two helpers carrying a huge and heavy wooden chest into the house. The chest is opened, and to everyone's surprise, it is completely filled with gold and jewels and coins, and Lucian is shocked. The main character thinks this must be a joke. Looking at the fortune, he sees this is the wealth of a great noble house. Holding the coins, he wonders if that whole amount is just for a single month. With a mean smile, he thinks with so much money his plan is totally doable. He will be able to rebuild his weak body and create the special drink he so needs to become stronger. The view then shows us a huge and pretty greenhouse where he will probably find the things he needs. Somewhere else we see the Archduke and his butler walking through a greenhouse full of flowers. The butler then says that place was what the late Archduchess loved most in life. He had stopped going to the place, so his return now was quite big. The reason for this return is due to the great and surprising change in young Master Lucian. Edwin thinks being the son of the woman he loved so much the Lord would not leave him so easily. We see the Archduke walking alone in the middle of the flowers his late wife loved so much. The butler then thinks about the past and thinks the young master was truly pitiful. He remembers how the young man always looked around afraid of everything and everyone. He was like a beaten dog that cried as soon as someone raised their voice near him. His act was so different from his mother's that the Archduke thought he had only taken her looks. But today, for the first time, the chief butler saw him in a completely different situation. He started to think perhaps he was wrong about the young master's true skill. The Archduke then asks if Edwin saw how Lucien looked him in the eye and spoke his mind. The butler says he has a kind heart and only paused for a while but still carries the Lord's blood. The leader of House Valdek, however, seems not sure and says that remains to be seen. He explains what is to come cannot be beaten with just mere nice words. At that, Edwin changes the subject and says there is only one problem that needs to be fixed fast. So Lucien's money help was started again, but there are signs some of the funds are leaking out. After looking, it seems the second young master, Jordi Valdek, is part of this. Jordi got rid of Lucien's maid to control him. The Archduke says he is able but narrow-minded. The Archduke says Jordi's hate is understandable, but he did not think he would be so persistent. Edwin asks if he should step in, but the Lord says no. The butler worries it might be too much for Lucien. The father says this is the price the third son is paying for wasting the last 1 year. He sees this as a test. If Lucien cannot handle it, there will be no hope for him. The leader of House Valdek ends the family's blood is a key, but the person needs to open the door. Then a few days pass, and the daily life in the great and rich Valdek home continues as always. Two maids talk, wondering how many days the young master has locked himself in his room again. We see Hans with an annoyed face because 3 days have already passed since the funds started coming again. The young master's personal helper seems completely shocked by what is happening. He remembers when the master said the talk with his father went well and the money help returned. The picture of the chest overflowing with gold and precious jewels comes to his mind at that moment. Hans thinks knowing what their relationship was like, it must not have been easy for the master at all. The helper believes his young master needed huge courage to face his father like that. Touched, he thinks Lucien is set to move forward, even with his sadness on his back. But now he sees his master playing with the gold coins in a very strange and fishy way. The main character's eyes shine with an almost crazy strength as he stares at the treasure. With a mean smile, he thinks with so much money he can finally do what he wants. His big plan is to rebuild his weak and fragile body by creating a strong secret drink. The scene then changes to a room where Lucien is busy making some mysterious potion. We see the young master completely focused on his work with a very set look. The main character thinks Hans must be full of questions, but he is loyal and guards the door as ordered. And there, he is the Archduke's son messing around with alchemy tools he had never seen in his life. He spent his money on a rare herb that only grows under moonlight and is incredibly costly. The name of this plant is moonlight grass, and the young noble spent everything he had on it. He then remembers an order he gave Hans to buy more of this herb before it is too late. He knows he looks like a crazy person right now, but in just 1 year its price is going to shoot up. The main character's eyes gleam with the sure thing that the plant's value will climb a lot. He knows in 1 year the price will go up 20 times, and he lies down in a pile of the herb. With a crazy smile, he celebrates the price will soar endlessly, and he is going to make a bundle. The former hired fighter thinks the alchemists of the past truly had a lot of guts. At the time, they were not sure if it would work out, but they did not give up on the idea anyway. They then swept up every single piece of the moonlight grass from the whole empire for their big project. That was a once-in-a-lifetime bet with the future of the whole group on the line. And thanks to that daring move, they managed to create a drink that shook the whole empire. This potion became known as the Drink of the Gods and changed the world forever. People called it a sin, and they were threatened with claims of doing wrong. But as soon as its effects became known, everyone changed their minds and sang its praises. The main character holds the drink with a happy grin at the result of his work. The drink broke a truth that had never been denied for over 1,000 years in history. The truth that inborn skills are fate and that no one can go beyond the limits they were born with. The main character explains the only thing that broke the common sense of the world for 1,000 years is the famous and strong potion known to everyone as the Drink of the Gods. And just by drinking this potion, even someone without skill could become a skilled swordsman. He then admits what he made is merely a copy that falls far short of the real thing. But to get back his weak body, there is nothing better than this at the moment. With a set look, he tells himself the young noble should consider himself lucky. It is shown the real recipe was lost when the alchemists' group was burned down in the past. Because of that, the recipe for the special drink vanished from the world without leaving any trace behind. But the main character managed to put clues together and make something pretty close to the famous potion. Enough talk. He gets ready to take the potion and finally change his fate. He then drinks the liquid. What truly matters begins from that moment. The potion changes the power of nature into something humans can use called mana. The quality of the power that can be pulled depends on how the mana moves through the body. With the help of the special drink, he forcibly widens the block paths inside his body. But even with the paths open, he wonders what on earth is happening to him. Instead of feeling the pain of fight, the mana flows smoothly as if it were natural. He thinks even a newborn's body has dirty stuff that blocks flow. Surprised, he asks himself if the young noble's body is special in some way. He questions if Lucien might be one of those monsters people call a genius. The scene then changes to a city at sunset, showing a passing of time. We see Hans waiting outside the window while his young master is inside. The helper seems restless and nervous as he walks back and forth in the hall. He peeks through the crack in the door with a worried look on his face. Lucien finally leaves the room and asks Hans if anything happened while he was away. The helper runs up to him crying and asks if he knows how long he has been in there. Hans complains he called but was not answered, and that he told him not to enter no matter what. He then says he was terrified, thinking something awful might have happened to the young master. Lucien comforts him and says he was really worried about him the whole time. The main character then gives a gentle smile to his personal helper, who watches him closely. The young noble's eyes shine in a different way that Hans had never seen before. The helper is confused and wonders if that truly is young Master Lucien. With several copies of himself, he tries to look at the master and feels he is not the same person. The main character then calls Hans' name and thinks his reaction is somewhat expected. He thinks since the helper has watched him closely for so long, it is normal for him to notice the difference. On the outside, there are no big changes yet. He needs food and time for that. Lucien's body still needs care to fully get better from its weakness, but what truly matters is the inside. A shining heart is shown in his chest. That inside is changing at an unbelievable speed thanks to the special drink's power. The main character understands Lucien's natural build is what made all this possible. He is certain the young noble's body is the key to his future success. This body's skill puts him in the same group as those who changed the world forever. With a sure smile, he thinks if everything goes well, he can beat his hired fighter self in 1 year. He then tells Hans in a way he owes this chance to him. The helper looks confused. The main character grabs him and says reward and punishment must always be clear and direct. He asks Hans to listen carefully because he is only going to say this once in his life. With a crazy look, he tells the scared helper to invest everything he owns down to the underclothes he is wearing. He then promises the scared helper the most comfy life he could ever imagine. Striking a big pose, he says the two of them will soar to the heavens together. With a smile, he says he is jealous of Hans because there were no nobles like him in his time. The scene changes, and 1 week later, we see a peaceful forest full of green. Lucien and Hans are walking calmly along a path in the middle of the trees in the forest. The two walk side by side, and the main character seems to be enjoying the moment greatly. With a happy smile, he thinks this is paradise and wonders if life can be so cozy. He remembers the many meals his rich room and the bed made ready for him by others. The young noble thinks in his past life going hungry was his daily normal routine. Thanks to all this comfort, he was able to focus completely on his getting better. Also, he fixed something that had been bothering him quite a bit since he woke up. The being of Jake, the guard of House Valdek that he was in his past life. He checked with the current guard captain and found out no one matching him had signed up. The shift he used to cover is now being done by a guy he has never seen before in his life. He thinks honestly this is for the best as there is nothing good about meeting his old self. The main character admits he does not have the courage to face who he was and would die from shame. Hans then notices his master shaking and walks over worried about what might be happening. The helper calls his name and the main character turns around with a serious, very set look. Hans asks if he really plans to go into the training grounds they were coming up to. He reminds the young master he always said he hated even stepping near that place. Lucien pretends not to understand, but the helper confirms he swore never to go back there. The reason was because the second young master scolded him during training last time. From Hans' reaction, the main character sees what happened in the young noble's past. To scare Lucien, the second son used sword training to terrify him. He can guess his brother's reasons, but tells Hans he does not need to worry about it. The young noble then says all of that belongs to the past, and things have changed. He takes a step forward set to move ahead with his new life plan. With a sure smile, he tells Hans all he needs to do is trust and follow him. They go into the training grounds and we see two men talking in a corner of the place. One of them asks if it is true the third young master came there on his own. The other says yes, and says he is looking at the place with his personal helper at that moment. Somewhere else, a man with a goat wonders what on earth is going through the kid's mind. He thinks this might be better than expected and smiles in a mean and fishy way. He then orders one of his men to report this to him right away. With a mean grin, the man says he will make sure the meal is well prepared when he arrives. Lucien looks around and thinks the place is much better than he expected in a good way. He notices there are many spare weapons, and he does not even need to worry about breaking. Also, the space is wide and perfect for moving and seriously training his move. The most amazing thing is all of that is just a private place for a single person. He thinks with a sad look if he had trained in a place like this, his men might have lived longer. At that moment, the man with the goatee walks up and says his eyes were not fooling him. He keeps saying it really is the third young master, and he was so surprised he did not want to believe it. The memory of Lucien running away the moment young master Jordi taught him is still very clear. Hans looks worried as the man keeps the teasing in front of the two boys. With a mocking smile, he compares him to a lamb being chased by a hungry wolf. He says maybe that is why the young master still seems scared of that place now. The man then criticizes Hans being in a training ground holy to fighters. He then says who he is as Hendrik, and formally says hello to young Master Lucien. He reminds him a year ago he helped guide his form along with the second young master and wonders if he remembers. We see a memory of young Lucien shaking with fear during training with his brother. With a happy smile, the man says it was a truly fun moment for him. The main character thinks now things are starting to get much more interesting. With a mean smile, he sees this fellow is the type of person he expected to meet. The person talking explains knights are born into noble families and trained since childhood. Only after gaining worth in battles and jobs do they get their noble title. Upon getting the title from their lord, they finally finish their status as a knight. But the main character thinks in the end they are nothing more than costly hunting dogs with fancy collars. That is why he understands that man's proud and rude act. They are always very polite to the lords who give them wealth and also much honor. This proud act is a common trait among knights from noble families. Lucian's bad name in the family also probably plays a big part in this. They are like loyal hunting dogs who serve their masters in trade for power and status, but mainly it is because they are backed from behind and feel completely untouchable. Honestly, the main character is already starting to get tired of that proud act. He would love to give them a hard training session and fix their mind set from the start. He daydreams about how fun it would be to teach that man and his proud brother a lesson, but he knows if he did that the Archduke would not just stand by without doing anything. Knights are the main force and valuable things of an important noble house like theirs. He thinks it is not the right time to act yet, and that he needs to be more patient for now. He then says avoiding the training grounds forever would be pitiful, and that he is going to learn to fight. The young man says since 1 year has already passed, there is no more time to waste on past nonsense. The man laughs and says the young master truly enjoys his jokes and does not take him seriously. Lucian asks if at 16 it is too late. Hendrik explains after 15 it is over. Sword forms are secret skills left by ancestors that make the body and mind better, but he explains this only means something if the mana path has been open from the start. Sword forms without understanding are just an empty shell and completely useless. With a mocking smile, he says perhaps that fits the third young master well. The other knights laugh as Hendrik teases him to become the greatest dancer in the empire. Another man joins the mockery and says he could spend his days taking care of gardens. The lesson was clear after all. Everyone has a role that suits them best in life. Hendrik then laughs and says how the young master is quiet and unable to say anything. He thinks the claim about the mana path closing at 16 is a lie. The real goal is to crush a fool with his own not knowing, leaving him without things to say. The picture of a pitiful worm scared and frozen in place comes to the knight's mind. Lucian then says what Hendrik is talking about seems a little different from what he knows. He says the mana path closes at 25, so it is fine to learn now. He then asks if his brother Jordi thinks the same way and says this is common knowledge. Hendrik sees he cannot argue after he used the second master's name. The main character understands even his brother said that and sees the seriousness of the situation. He then grabs Hans ahead and says it looks like House Valdek is heading toward ruin. Hans is confused and wonders why he is suddenly being dragged into that talk. Lucian yells that's the basics, and even a stray dog would know, and wonders how he does not know. He is sad about how many skilled people had their chances stolen because of that wrong knowledge. The young noble then says thinking his brother has an empty skull is maddening. He yells if what Hendrik said is true, this is a shame to the house and a clear crisis. With a mean smile, he says he does not believe the knight would try to trick him with such nonsense. The scene then returns to normal, and the three men are standing in the middle of the training grounds. Hendrik stammers and says he would never do that. Lucian blames him of lying with nonsense. The main character then pretends to give up and says the situation is so unbelievable he is talking rubbish. With a fake smile, he says a knight of House Valdek would not stoop to something so petty. Hendrik quickly agrees, but Lucian stops him and says in that case one cannot laugh. The knight is quiet at the change in act of the family's young master. The main character then says he will explain the situation so everyone can understand better. At that moment, the second young master, Jordi Valdek, shows up at the training grounds. He runs up to him and says he will explain everything that was happening at that moment. Desperate, he tries to explain, but Jordi stops him before he can finish. The second young master tells him to stop because there is no need to explain the situation. With a mocking smile, he says he does not need an explanation because he saw everything with his own eyes. He walks up and says he saw his shame at being fooled by a child who barely lived. Jordi glares at him with hate and says that is more than let down for a knight. He then tells the man to fix his look and stop making that beat face. The second master threatens him and tells him not to put him in an even more shameful spot. Jordi then turns and walks slowly toward his younger brother and the helper. Hence grabs Lucian's arm and says his brother seems to be really angry. The main character thinks his brother's look of anger is really something to admire. Then the second young master of House Valdek, Jordi Valdek, a noble among nobles, is introduced. His group was weak, so he brought many outsiders, but most did not come to a good end. If he judged someone useless, he would make up a crime and get rid of the person without thinking twice. Lucian greets him with a smile and asks if he has been well since the last time they saw each other. Jordi stares at him with a cold look and says he really is very slow to understand things. The second master walks up and Hans clings to his master, afraid of what is to come. He tells he saw everything that happened between him and Hendrik, every word that was said. With a mean smile, he says Lucian acted in a way that shames the house dignity. The main character asks him to explain more clearly how he shamed the Valdek family. Everyone is surprised, and immediately that dirty dog Hendrik goes toward where he is, probably hoping to explain everything or at least control the damage. The situation right now, he stammers, very nervous, but Lord Jordi tells him to shut up. That's enough. You don't need to explain anything. I saw your disgrace with my own eyes. To think you let yourself be manipulated by a child barely half your age, truly disappointing for him. You should compose your expression, at least if you don't want to put yourself in an even more awkward position. Hans is scared behind Lucian. Lord Geordie seems really angry about this, but certainly his expression is quite notorious, since he is the second Prince of Baldeck, Geordie Baldeck. Even when he served as palace guard, he was famous for his dog-like temper, the very definition of a noble, the kind of boss who yells first and asks questions never. As his faction was weaker than the first princes, he brought in many outsiders, and most ended in a terrible fate. Once he decided someone served him, he'd invent a crime and discard them, just that easily. Lucian greets Prince Geordie. Long time no see, second prince. He asks if he's been well. Geordie immediately calls him an idiot. Lucian apologizes but doesn't know what that means. Whatever words passed between you and Mr. Hendry, I saw it all. You dared to stain the dignity of House Baldeck. Lucian wants him to explain that a bit more clearly. How so? But it seems Sir Hendrik has been out of line. What exactly happened? However, using his name to provoke unnecessary chaos is undoubtedly his mistake, and he cannot escape responsibility. Nevertheless, he has no intention of reprimanding him for this incident. He is fully aware of how much blood he has spilled for House Baldeck. Unlike him, who couldn't even endure basic sword training and fled like a coward. Does he think he has the right to sermonize someone? Lucian Baldeck, learn first to respect your knights because thanks to them, Baldeck exists. Geordie tells everyone, I apologize on the boy's behalf for today's disturbance. It was the mistake of an inexperienced child, so please be indulgent. I will closely watch over this foolish little brother of mine. The classic PR move, turning a personal insult into a chance to look magnanimous. Lucian is moved, so he wants to play that way. How quickly his mind works. Although he was the one insulted, he twists it into an offense against the knights and seizes the occasion to polish his reputation. He will grant him this. But Lucian, as expected of his dear brother, even if there was a misunderstanding between Mr. Hendrik and him, he clearly insulted him first and should be scolding him, yet he still grants such valuable teaching. Calling his head an empty helmet without saying it's hollow and sounds like a tin can. Anyway, he is ashamed to have said such embarrassing things. Thanks to his magnanimity, he has learned another lesson today, surprising all the knights. They can't believe it. In exchange for this, he will use him as a stepping stone to completely erase the weak image of Lucian. With that, he immediately asks if he may withdraw. Staying here longer won't benefit either of them. Geordie gets angry. You insolent brat, seems you don't understand the gravity of all this. You think you can just leave this place. But Lucian asks him, did you forget? Father watches you very closely. I have nothing to lose, but you, as my brother, I'll take your silence as your permission. Then he withdraws and they leave. They must run. Hendrik looks at Geordie and is very angry. He can't believe he's really going to let them go, but there's an incredible murderous intent emanating from him. We're leaving. Back with Lucian, Hans, scared, asks him if everything is okay. He knows Master Geordie's temperament. He'll never let something like this pass. And even if he did, it's terrifying and he no longer understands. He must calm down. At that moment he has a memory. Only those who have suffered know that feeling. When an incompetent superior causes problems and leaves you to bear all the consequences. There's nothing more miserable than that. That won't happen to him, so he must rise up. A knight wouldn't dare do something like that, and he won't allow it either. He has already suffered enough because of it. When the master acts like an idiot, those below are the ones who die from it, and being his personal assistant must have been even worse for him. He will promise him something from now on. He will not allow his people to be despised nor tremble in fear over nonsense. So they will do a good job together, and he extends his hand. The I've got your back contract signed in blood and loyalty. Back at the palace, he knows that after the training hall incident, he wondered why everything was so quiet. The Geordie he knows is not the type to stay still while receiving a beating. He knew it. This is the pathetic trick that makes you act so arrogantly. He knows how long he had been waiting for this day. Hans doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's right, his young master. There's no way they can let this pass. He asks if he's ready, and of course Lucian knows. How dare he touch his money and his salary? It all started with the budget plan he received today. The day he was supposed to buy moonlight grass and stock up on necessary supplies. The day his account was supposed to be replenished. That was supposed to happen until he received that letter. In short, Lucian Baldeck's budget was reduced by 75%, Hans's salary by 30%, and that's it. This stupid bastard seized his budget through the maid he installed in his annex, the backstab of a micromanaging sibling. However, the reason he could commit such an atrocity was because he found a gap to infiltrate his side. After the passing of the third young lord's consort, that is, Lucian's mother, Lucian had delegated budget management to someone else, the head maid Dana, who had been by his side for many years. Not that young, inexperienced head maid who is in that place. It's the first time he greets her in person. Pleased to meet you, young Master Lucian. I am Jenny, the new head maid, replacing Master Dana. She tried at least to greet him when she was appointed, but back then he seemed completely reluctant to come out. Has his long period of absence finally ended? The power play of a servant who knows exactly who holds the real authority. Hans gets angry. What kind of manners are those to address your young master? But Lucien tells him to calm down. She's right. They'll set aside these minor matters for today. There's something more important he must resolve right now. He'll get straight to the point. He asks her if she wrote that budget. She starts laughing. She wondered why he called her, and it was about the budget. Yes, she wrote it. As the young master had granted authority to the former head maid, she carried out all assigned tasks, but this does leave her a bit perplexed. Suddenly he questions her. You worked diligently. This was originally your work, young master. He knew she would use that as an excuse. It was clearly Lucien's oversight. He understands and supposes it can be avoided, but even setting that aside, there's something he doesn't understand. He confirmed that most of the funds his father had given him anew were used to increase the servants' salaries. They have suffered much from his negligence, so that could be considered compensation. But why was Hans's salary cut instead of raised? That seems too brazen to him. But she supposes it was a mistake. There are so many things she has to worry about that when she handles all the household tasks. Everyone present can attest that her workload is completely sixfold. Don't they agree? And all nervously immediately say yes. Jenny has been very busy. From now on, they will assist Miss Jenny better. The hostage situation disguised as a workplace meeting. Lucien breathes. They will leave there. The body is his, but it seems all his limbs only obey others' orders. He tells the head maid he has one last question and hopes she answers carefully. Do you know who your master is? And she tells him that regarding that, she will ask Geordie. The ultimate, I answer to a higher authority deflection. They go outside. Rotted fabric can only survive if completely torn out. That's exactly his situation now. He has gone with his young master to a tavern. He said he was going fishing to find some peace of mind. But this place is different. There are many people battling, and it's basically a boxing ring. He asks Hans if he doesn't feel it yet. This place is for fishing some big fish. Arriving at the bar, they tell him this isn't a place where brats like him should be lurking. They should get out of that place while he's being nice. But Lucien responds, what a fussy betting house. Don't they accept this type of client? The confidence of a man who knows he's about to pull a fast one. Beforehand, he knows there are several reasons why he hasn't directly dealt with the head maid. First, Jenny is not a simple head maid. She's the daughter of the nanny who cared for Geordie since he was a baby. Messing with her carelessly would only fuel the flames. Second, the hierarchy on Lucien's side was more chaotic than he imagined. Since this situation defies common sense, a more suitable solution is needed. And finally, the Archduke must know about this. In other words, fixing this problem must be a test for him, so he will have to prove what he's capable of. And in this card game, he knows he must win some money to progress in this life. He doesn't know how many winning streaks he's had. He's very good. His opponent is a veteran. He has lost. He asks him if he gives up already since this is getting fun. He wants to have much more fun. Hans is surprised. Since when does the young master have these kinds of skills? Lucien asks if there's anyone else who wants to bet with him since he's heard rumors. This is all they have. Now that he's won so much money, it's time for this guy to make his move, and he just came out. He regrets not recognizing such an honorable person. He will apologize and greet him. He is Hugo, the manager of this place. A butler tells the others that due to unforeseen circumstances, the place has been closed. They have caused inconvenience to other clients, and does that matter? As long as young Master Lucien can have a pleasant time, that's everything. But it's been a while since he came out, yet he still recognizes him. It takes that kind of sensitivity to make a living in this business. Again, he apologizes for the delay in greeting him, but he shouldn't worry, as he only came to get some fresh air. He really is a great young man. It's been a while since he saw a client win so much money. If it's not rude, he would like to face him. He asks if he himself, and of course, he wouldn't be up to facing the young master directly, but being in charge of this place, he has acquired some experience. He supposes that will be enough to pass the time, don't you think? Hans is completely scared and wants to go back right now. He's already won a lot of money, and that man gives off a very bad vibe. He has seen many fearsome people inside the palace, but that look is truly one of the worst he has seen in his life. Hans hasn't wasted his time as a servant. Of course, this is something to expect. It's the black shark Hugo. In the future, he is a man who will rise to the underworld. His path began in the dark alleys of a city. He only possessed a strong body, but before him, no barrier could resist his combination of violence and cunning. He quickly stood out, and after getting involved in betting, smuggling, and contract killings, he came to control the underworld of 5 territories, becoming the king of the night. After that, he took advantage of the impending division of the empire and proclaimed himself a baron. Although he's still a novice, as Hans said, this guy is dangerous, and today he has come to hunt him. The hand has already been dealt. Lucien explains it's a simple card game, and for Hugo, it's fine. He won't set a maximum limit on bets. He can't let the young master who came here in person get bored. Lucien is happy, and Hans is scared, because he has finally found someone who can identify with him. Hugo indicates it's an honor for him. although he knows he's a typical ignorant brat who depends on his family to get ahead. He hasn't even realized that what he just said will be his own death sentence. He knows it's a good thing. Actually, it wasn't in the plan for the assigned dealer to be plucked clean, but a brat like that, who sinks deeper and deeper into a trap the more he loses. He will devour this carefree brat down to the bone, the predator's internal monologue, completely unaware he's about to become the prey. Lucien tells him he should look. Hugo doesn't know what's happening, but it's nothing serious. Before starting, he has a question to ask him, and of course he will answer with all sincerity. Lucien tells him it's the first time they meet, but he likes him very much. One can learn a lot about superiors just by observing subordinates. Even if it's not legal, managing something of this magnitude requires common skill. If they had crossed the line, they would have found out and punished him long ago. Since Hugo knows his place, he is careful not to offend superiors, but he doesn't have to be so rigid, Lucien indicates. Although he is on the side of the Baldeck family, he's not so intimidating, so he'll thank him to answer sincerely. When does he plan to begin large-scale production? Hugo doesn't know what he's talking about, but he already knows that. They are preparing in Bistrah. He's referring to the illegal hallucinogenic drug, surprising him immediately by what he says. The tension in the atmosphere is palpable. Hans is completely scared by what Lucien says. Meanwhile, Hugo is surprised and stammers, asking his young master what the hell he's talking about. A hallucinogen. What is that? But their Lucien immediately interrupts him. He doesn't want him to play dumb. He heard him perfectly. Why? He asks again. He was instigated by House Logren, wasn't he? With a smile, a few friends, though he immediately changes it. He means destabilizing House Baldeck by distributing illegal drugs, isn't that it? Although thinking a marquis would give such lowly orders, there are certain lines that simply shouldn't be crossed. Isn't that right, Hugo? He asks, but he doesn't know how to respond or what to say. He has started to sweat while Lucien continues speaking. The audacity to commit such acts in the territories of House Baldeck. The moment something goes wrong and he gets caught, everyone associated with House Baldeck would clamor to tear him apart. Every single one of them, without exception. Lucien indicates to Hugo that his mind must be complete chaos right now. But they'll wonder how Lucien knows this. He remembers he was Jack in his past life, and originally this incident wasn't supposed to come to light for another 2 years. By then, the Archduke would have received a report that drugs were spreading through the territories. And although he raided the operations base at that time, Hugo had already fled the city. That screw him back then is really bearing fruit now, the future knowledge cheat code in full effect. Hugo not knowing what to say and with the atmosphere very tense, Hugo explains, though trembling, that he is simply an insignificant man who earns some money in a small shop. Him, trafficking drugs, please. Surely someone jealous spread these unfounded rumors about him. The desperate lies of a cornered rat. But Lucien, simply smiling and laughing, talks to him about these unfounded rumors. Now he says that. Then Lucien asks him, he supposes the rice mill he runs is just a common shop, right? Lucien wants to ask one last time, what stage is the drug distribution at now? Hugo doesn't know what to say. He sits down, sweating, completely out of control. He knows about the facade business and the secret passage. If he knows so much, excuses won't help. In that case, Hugo has a very bad idea. He should eliminate him, that's what he thinks. He knows his bodyguards have knives and are armed. An unescorted noble brat should be easy to eliminate with a single blow and get him out of the way. Then maybe I can fix this with violence thought process. Hans is completely nervous and crying. He wants to leave this place, but Lucien with a calm voice tells Hugo he should think carefully before acting. What's at stake in this bet is his own life. He should be careful considering how he reached his position. Hugo realizes he's incredibly stupid. What was he thinking? He asks himself. Laying a hand on a son of House Baldeck would end with him begging to be put out of this world. He simply closes his eyes. He has to survive no matter what. And without thinking twice, he simply kneels before him. The checkmate of a man who just realized he's been playing chess against a grandmaster while he was still learning the rules. He wants her forgiveness and begs for his life. Hugo tells him he believes there must be a reason he came looking for him personally, surprising both Hans and Lucien with what he says. Although Lucien smiles a bit, Hugo indicates that otherwise his head would have left his shoulders long ago. The survival instincts of a man who knows exactly which way the wind is blowing. Immediately, all of Hugo's subordinates also kneel, and all at the same time beg for mercy. Please forgive everyone and the young master in front of Lucien, a synchronized surrender worthy of a choreographed performance. Lucien calmly picks up one chip or another. He knows that keeping a dog wouldn't be bad at all. He was just thinking he needed a lackey he could give orders to. Hugo, excited, thanks him since he only needs to give the order and he'll do anything. But Lucien approaches him. He must know something, isn't that so? A bit bored, he asks, confusing Hugo, since he doesn't seem like the type of person who would settle for just being a house dog. He tells Hugo he must listen to something. Wouldn't you like to try being a knight? Surprising Hugo, the offer no one saw coming. These words race through his mind. Wouldn't he like to be a knight? Immediately he begins to think. It was a dream he once yearned for with all his might, but in the end he had no choice but to give up on that stupid dream. As time passed, it became increasingly clear, going to his memory. No matter how many times he perfected his skills or risked his life for his master, in the end they threw him a bag of money because he was just a simple dog. He was merely a convenient tool for the nobility, because it really doesn't matter what he does, he can't change that stupid status he was born with. Even receiving that scar on his face, the flashback of a man who's been kicked by the system one too many times, those words echo in his mind. Wouldn't he like to be a knight? He really thinks about it. Immediately he presses his face against the floor. If he could become a knight, he would even sell his soul. And kneeling there, he asks if he really could become one. But Lucien immediately swears by the honor of House Baldeck. If someday you can achieve an honor and integrity that you're not ashamed of, then something as trivial as your status won't be an obstacle. Lucien asks Hugo if he won't live as a man instead of as a common tool, immediately surprising him. The class change, option no one expected to see. A few days later, we go to Lucien's mansion. The maids are a bit scared. They don't know what's happening, and the servants are even worse. Everyone is very nervous, the vibe of an office the day before layoffs. Meanwhile, Lucien asks permission to introduce them all. He's a talented person he's hired from outside. They're all in Lucien's office while he's a bit relaxed. He wants Hugo to introduce himself to everyone. Hugo with a firm voice indicates that his name is Hugo and starting today, he will be at the young master's service. With a psychopathic look, he hopes to work well with all of them and get along in this new life. The friendly greeting that looks anything but friendly. Since they're all gathered there, Lucien is very calm. He claps. Now then, since introductions are finished, I want them to bring the head maid to this place. The butlers don't understand why he wants the head maid, why they must bring her here so suddenly. Lucien asks, why else? The head maid should also greet Hugo, shouldn't she? The logic of a man about to clean house. Meanwhile, Lucien thinks, they can't let him be scolded like last time. And it's correct, he has no choice but to first inform the busy head maid. Lucien realizes their behavior is just as he expected. The staff have passed the point where normal methods work. Of course, it's the obvious answer for anyone. Since they're scared and looking at each other, they mustn't be reckless. In their eyes, Lucien must seem like a rotten rope they must cling to. In that case, Lucien will make sure they really understand. The butler tells the young master to please consider their situation. He knows it more than anyone. Lord Geordie pays special attention to the head maid. What power could they have over her? Everyone begins to shout. You're right, please. You must be understanding because you're deliberately fanning these flames. They just want to live peacefully as before. The chorus of people who have been comfortable in their betrayal for too long. At that moment, Hans gets angry. All of you must come to your senses. Have you completely forgotten your duties to this house? The master of this place is young Master Lucien, not the second young Master Geordie, immediately surprising Hugo. But Hugo smiles. To Elder Hans, he wants him to please leave this to him. His sharp words seem too good for these types to understand. He approaches Lucien and tells his young master that he has identified what must be done. Lucien is surprised, so fast. And yes, with these bastards who don't know their place, they must instill loyalty. It's very simple. Hans is scared, but Hugo says that, however, this could get a little noisy. He requests his permission, the professional asking permission to go full beast mode. Lucien, happy with what he says, knows he's undoubtedly quick-minded. He places his hand on his shoulder and indicates that, of course, he permits it. That's exactly what he wanted to do. Now Lucien and Hugo are completely synchronized. He shouldn't worry and should give him a good show. And for Hugo, that's fine. As you command, Hugo goes to where the butler is. The butler realizes he's extremely large. He's strong, although he looks even bigger up close. But why is he approaching him so intimidating? He tells himself he mustn't be afraid, though he's already sweating and surely completely drenched, the fight-or-flight response kicking in hard. The butler knows that at the end of the day he's just a thug from the alleys, and with much courage, though with a trembling voice, he tells him it seems he's stepping forward without knowing the situation of this place. It would be prudent to choose the correct side. Does he have any idea how cruel Lord Geordie is? He asks Hugo. The tide has tilted in their favor for a long time, but Hugo says nothing, simply closes his fist. This butler continues talking. He won't be so foolish as to risk his life for a few coins, will he? Hugo asks if those are his last words and how pathetic they are. The butler doesn't understand what he's saying, but now he's going to understand well since he's landed a good punch, surprising the maids and the butlers, as he's gone flying directly against the wall while Hans is scared, and our protagonist Lucien is happy with what he observes. The one-punch man certification achieved. Hugo simply looks with contempt at this butler, who is completely knocked out on the floor. Everyone else begins shouting at him. What is this about using violence? Although the young master brought him to this place, does he really think he has the right to do this kind of thing? Although these shouts, as it were, Hugo's spirit moves him much more. He has more than enough right to do so, because he has specialized in educating these crazy bastards who don't respect who they should, the HR department from hell. We simply see a teacup moving from the blows happening inside the room. We see one passed out while they drag Ginny in. She doesn't understand what's happening. She wants them to let go. She said it. She thinks they can get away with this, she asks them. But the butlers tell her to shut up and she must follow them. She still hasn't understood the situation well. Upon opening the door, Jenny is angry. How dare you raise your voice at me? You'll pay for what you did today. But at that moment, she realizes all the servants are kneeling on the floor without saying a single word. Everyone is trembling, and the butlers indicate that just as ordered, they have brought the head maid Jenny to this place. Lucien is calmly looking out his window, then turns and changes his face to something more friendly. You're here. I only asked them to bring you, but it seems everyone got a little too excited. Jenny doesn't know what's happening. Her face is a bit reddish and she's trembling, but with courage she asks what all this means. Does he think he can get away with this? If he thought she would be scared, he's wrong. Lord Geordie would never allow this to remain like this, shaking off the butlers. But Lucien says absolutely nothing. She keeps talking, since if she stops now she'll make sure that today's events end here. But Lucien tells her to calm down a bit. Who said this was going to end today? He brings his hand to a whip and immediately hits his hand with it. This is just beginning, the sound of a man about to make a very loud point. Jenny doesn't know what to say. Now she's truly completely scared. Lucien indicates to the head maid that she can say whatever she wants, because today she will die here no matter what happens. But first we'll witness the execution, since ancient times it has been an ostentatious method and an efficient means of issuing a warning. It has justification and the objective is clear, and above all, it's clearly engraved. In other words, even without completely changing the inner circle, they will yield. Lucien approaches Jenny. She's in front, although very scared, she remains firm before our protagonist. Lucien knows it's enough, and through what happened today, he'll also be able to make the Archduke know. He has that whip in his hand. He knows the weak and miserable third son no longer exists. He immediately calls one of them to make Jenny kneel before him. She's scared but laughs. She tells her young master he better think carefully. He said he would kill her, but if he leaves even a small scratch on her, does he think Master Geordie will stand by with a smile on his face since she feels supported by young Master Geordie? Furthermore, her mother was Master Geordie's nanny. As the daughter of that nanny, she's like a sister to him. The "you can't touch me, I have connections" defense. Lucien indicates nothing, simply observes her with contempt. He asks if that's all she has to say. If those are her last words, it's fine to keep repeating the same thing. If she keeps screaming her brother's name until the moment of her death, that would feel a bit unfair. Jenny looks a bit strange, doesn't know what's happening, but indicates that if he has more cards to play, he should show them now. She stammers, that is, Master Geordie will do something. Lucien explains to the head maid that she is deeply mistaken about something. He already has more than enough justification to take her out of this world, starting with insulting a noble, as well as negligence, incitement, embezzlement, and more, completely terrifying Jenny, the charge sheet longer than her tenure. Lucien indicates that it also seems she forgot her place just because she was raised by the same nanny. He asks her what she thinks Geordie, the one she's crying for, can really do. At most, he could hit him a few times and consider the matter settled, but he can't even do that if his father intervenes. But he has something else to tell her. Or maybe he'll reward him for doing it, for taking care of an uncontrolled brat who has nothing to do. She has started to sweat and perspire. Lucien has inflicted fear on her. Geordie is just one of the successors, same as the person in front of her right now. Lucien knows he definitely gave her an opportunity and she herself provoked the situation. She has started to tremble, her hands very shaky. She knows she was wrong and is trembling a lot. She wants her young master to forgive her, but Lucien says nothing. She must consider this now simply as bad luck. And at that same moment, the punishment begins. Back at the mansion, he immediately goes running. This makes no possible sense. Just a few days ago, he was the one who withdrew after being humiliated by Jenny, and now he's unleashed saying he's going to eliminate her. That's not the only strange thing either. In case something like this happened, he put people in the annex where Lucien was staying. The servants surely would have tried to stop him. That things have come to this, despite everything, means he has taken control of the servants. He arrives and tells the young master that the report must be wrong. He must calm down a moment, since considering his personality it makes no sense that he could harm someone. Above all, he is the one who fears young Master Geordie the most. And yes, but definitely something doesn't fit. At that moment, he hears the screams, and upon entering, we simply see that whip bathed in what you know. The situation is ugly, as Hugo has hold of Jenny, while Lucien stands in front, the scene of a horror movie where the victim finally becomes the predator. He immediately asks what he thinks he's doing right now, but Lucien tells his brother that brings him here. He's sorry, but right now he's busy, so please he wants him to come back later. Today he has to uproot this impurity. He indicates to Hugo in front of everyone that he must lift her again. He says yes, but Geordie tells Hurt, to bring Jenny now and indicates yes. They immediately go toward where Jenny is. But Lucien, with a simple word to Hugo, tells him that if anyone comes within less than 3 steps of them, he can cut the head maid's throat. He turns with a murderous look since he will assume all responsibility, the "I dare you" challenge of a man with nothing to lose. Immediately they stop, and Hugo knows he won't let anyone out alive under any circumstances, so he must be calm. The knife is near her neck, and Jenny is crying, calling for Lord Geordie. He immediately asks him to put away that dagger. If he doesn't obey his orders right now, not only will he cut her head, but the heads of her entire family, and he'll hang them on the castle wall, the escalation of threats reaching nuclear levels. But at that moment, a voice tells him he fears that won't be possible, and he doesn't understand why. But his master is Master Lucien. He has no reason to obey orders from someone who isn't his master. No matter what happens to him later, it's his duty to follow his master's orders. Hugo's loyalty bar now permanently locked at maximum. At that moment, he clenches his fist. He knows he has no control over this situation. He asks Lucien what Jenny did for him to act in such a cruel manner, but he simply indicates that she insulted her superior, disobeyed orders, and even manipulated the budget. He's simply applying an appropriate punishment. He shouldn't distinguish between public and private matters, frightening Geordie. He doesn't know who the hell this guy is. The existential crisis of a prince realizing his punching bag has grown teeth. But first we go to something. In House Baldeck, the first young master Tristan Baldeck and the second young master Geordie Baldeck are currently in a succession war. In other words, until the decisive day arrives for Geordie, this was a critical moment for him to consolidate his position above all else. However, he was recently publicly humiliated by Lucien, and as a result suffered a loss by being forced to distance his closest knight, Sir Hendrik. In a situation like this, if even this time he fails to protect Jenny, who is like his own hands and feet, it will inevitably become a turning point where distrust and cracks would begin to spread among those who follow him. In short, it was complete checkmate, the game theory of noble politics laid bare. Geordie tells Lucien that he wins, he must let her go, surprising everyone. Hans can't believe it, and Hugo simply continues holding the dagger awaiting Lucien's orders. But Lucien indicates that's not even funny. He intends to simply sweep everything under the rug with a single word after plundering someone else's valuable livelihood. Does he think his tongue is bathed in gold or what? Nobles really can't believe how stupid they are, the insult wrapped in philosophy. Lucien asks his brother what he's talking about right now. When? He's simply fulfilling his duties as the third son of the young master. Furthermore, embezzlement is a crime from which no one can escape regardless of their status, surprising Geordie. If they simply cover it up and move on, what do you think people would think? Since his respected brother asks so insistently, he would also like to leave this matter here, but for Lucien, he lacks the justification to do so. Geordie is very angry, wants him to stop beating around the bush and speak clearly about what he really wants. At that moment in front of Jenny, he drops the whip. Since ancient times, those who laid hands on another's property generally received similar punishments, having to return several times the amount stolen. Jenny is terrified, and Geordie doesn't know what he's talking about. And Lucien tells his brother that thus the incident will be resolved as follows. No, we go to the Archduke, since they've told him the same phrase that the incident was resolved that way. He is reading the report. He asks the head butler if this report is true or not, but he personally confirmed it. Master Geordie paid young Master Lucien 10 times the involved amount as compensation, and young Master Lucien has recruited an outsider known as Hugo to quickly eradicate the spies infiltrated in his annex. As a result, young Master Lucien's annex is currently more strongly guarded than any other area, surprising him, the report card of a student who just skipped several grades. At that moment, someone knocks on his door, and he wants them to enter, as Lucien enters and heard that his father had summoned him, surprising him. He has a cold look, and Lucien doesn't know what this is. His look feels different than before, but at that moment he hears that he has caused quite a stir recently, surprising even Lucien, unable to contain his expression. The moment a child realizes the parent has noticed they've been playing chess instead of checkers. For Lucien, it was nothing out of this world. He simply disciplined servants who didn't know how to recognize their own master, the understatement of the century, delivered with the confidence of a man who just won a war without firing a shot. He indicates, however, that as a result he made his brother look ridiculous. He won't forget it for a long time. Can you handle the consequences? He asks. But for Lucien, there's nothing to handle, his father explains. It was simply a matter of clarifying hierarchy and order. If he avoided even such obvious duties for fear of reprisals, how could he dare claim the name of Baldeck? He simply made a decision that would bring no shame to their name, surprising his father, the logic of a man who's done playing the victim. He has nothing more to say and knows that if Geordie continues provoking him, he's free to respond. However, if the conflict escalates too much, it will damage the family. His father tells him that he will side with Geordie regardless of who is right, the cold calculus of a patriarch who values stability over justice. Lucien can't believe this, that's exactly what he's saying. But why is he so surprised? He asks. Although Geordie has an impulsive side, his contributions to the family over the years are significant, unlike him who spent over a year loafing around. As head of the family, choosing someone who has contributed to it is completely natural logic. He doesn't think so. Lucien remains thoughtful, but if he's not mistaken, that sounds like an instruction to trample his brother and achieve ascension. The realization that his father isn't picking favorites, he's running a gladiator arena. His father tells him to build his strength and become an asset to the family. Then he will know the answer to that question. Lucian, thoughtful, simply observes him. He intends to increase the sense of crisis to push him forward. Moreover, if he declares it so definitively, it means the succession structure will be decided very soon. That's why he wants him to hurry and seize opportunities before it's too late. He wonders if all fathers are normally like this. At that moment, he takes a letter from his suit, but he thinks that if he's so worried about his son, this will serve him. He asks his father, and if he has already prepared a move, a bigger one besides what he thinks, what would he say? Our protagonist has handed the letter to his father. The moment a child shows the parent they've been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Upon reading it, he gets angry, asks if this report is really accurate. He thinks that if he's exaggerating to gain merit, he should tell him now, but it contains nothing but the truth. Furthermore, following House Logren's orders has helped him secure the internal informant who was moving to distribute the drugs. He can verify it immediately. The receipts are in, and they're damning. Immediately, his father emanates an incredible aura from his body. Benhard, that shameless son of the Marquis, dares to try to tarnish the territories of Baldec. Lucian realizes the pressure is overwhelming. This is truly the sword that protects the Empire and the master of House Baldec. At this rate, something might happen to him first, the feeling of standing next to a nuclear reactor about to go critical. Lucian indicates to his father that he should allow him to say a few words. He wants to know what's happening. But even if they report this truth to His Majesty, House Logren will surely cut off its tail to escape this situation. Since all involvement was carried out through their subordinate merchant guilds, on the surface there's no trace of their direct participation. Moreover, even if they force the issue and dig deeper, given that His Majesty distrusts factional confrontations, intervention will inevitably occur. The political calculus of a man who's seen this movie before. He doesn't know since when his eye for reading political situations has become so sharp. His father says nothing, simply thoughtful. I need an explanation. And what do you have in mind? Lucian indicates that a way to ensure they cannot escape he has already secured. Not long ago, an informant surrendered to him. He has no title, but earned Logren's deep trust and rose to executive rank. That information matches what his butler had told him. The young master recruited an outsider named Hugo. So the man the head butler mentioned that day was an informant, the ultimate deep cover agent. The third son has been anticipating this situation. He asks if he intends to use a traitor to set a counter-trap, and that's correct. From his perspective, it's hard to expect an executive who handled the drugs to betray them. He made those arrangements precisely so they would believe their plans are progressing smoothly. It won't be long until a key figure from Logren has no choice but to personally step forward, the trap within a trap, layered like political lasagna. However, there's a huge flaw in his plan, the fact that he's betting everything on a single variable, on a traitor from the back alleys. Human nature cannot be challenged. Lucian, with someone untrustworthy, must keep in mind that he won't be able to take a single step. Lucian indicates that more than trusting the man, he bet on him because of the desire he possesses. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but he said he wanted to become a knight, spread his fame throughout the empire, and engrave his name in the history of this city. His father indicates that's a statement that forgets his place. But for a man, it's also a dream he yearns for deeply. He believes in that same dream, just as he did in his past life. The power of someone who knows what it's like to want something so badly it hurts. His father thinks it's a truly sentimental reason, but what will he do if he ruins everything? He asks his father. Lucian indicates that if that happens, he has no intention of avoiding responsibility. The mistake of someone under his command is ultimately his responsibility. He will pay the price even if he has to stake his own neck, the leadership philosophy of a man who leads from the front. His father turns around. Once his body recovers, he wants him to go out to the training field, as he will teach him the lion heart sword, since now he is also one of the candidates for the next head of the house, the ultimate promotion unlocked. At night, we go with his father and the butler. He intends to open the path for him accordingly. Starting tomorrow, he intends to teach him the family's secret techniques. A wise decision. He asks if he has someone in mind as a swordsmanship master, and he will request it from Sir Aizen. It's regrettable to disturb his retirement in his later years, but it will undoubtedly be a meaningful time for him as well. We go at night to the room where Hans tells his lord that what he just said is no joke. He's very happy. He can't believe he's a candidate for the house. At that moment, Hugo lifts him up, wants him to calm down. With the young master's attitudes, this would be a natural step. Moreover, if he starts on the path he'll have to travel from now on, it would be appropriate for his right hand to be so surprised, since he is the right hand and gets very excited. The banter of two loyal idiots who just hit the jackpot. He starts talking and the two of them start laughing, although for him he knows that as expected of Hugo, he's clearly an experienced professional. What Hugo says is not incorrect. Before an official announcement within the family, having informed only the two of them carries a similar meaning. Hans, his timidity, his fragile character could become his weakness, but he sincerely appreciates Lucian, and even in adverse consequences has remained firmly with his tenacity. So if he gains experience and grows and becomes a talent capable of handling internal affairs, he will become the most solid support that can exist. Besides Hugo's ability, there's no doubt. He just has to open the path for him to become a knight. By doing so, he will be able to extract Hugo's maximum potential, and over time, he will become a powerful sword at his service. Now is the time to prioritize quality over quantity. From now on, they will be very busy doing their things. What lies ahead is a journey he won't be able to face with his strength alone, and he can only complete it if they do it together. Hugo won't disappoint him, and Hans tells his young master that he won't either. The party formation complete, ready for the main quest. The next day, we go to the training castle. Our protagonist is there. He knows that in his past life, he wandered across the continent seeking one thing, the essence of his ancestors' martial arts, which was said to elevate the level of sword technique. And among them, it specifically spoke of an even higher level, the so-called advanced sword technique. However, after suffering like a dog, what he finally obtained was neither the advanced sword technique he so yearned for, nor even the intermediate sword technique that one only learns upon reaching the rank of captain in knight orders. Only a degraded version that only apprentice knights master, the tutorial skills of a player stuck on easy mode. Even the sword technique was something that without an appropriate lineage, one could not achieve. For him, a mere mercenary, to have the chance to learn it was only a matter of divine luck, but those who were formerly no match for him learned superior techniques and surpassed him, and each time he couldn't protect his companions. Seth's desire for sword techniques tormented him. Then that opportunity finally arrived, the ancient sword technique that only candidates for head of House Baldeck and their closest receive. A technique that far surpasses advanced sword technique, the opportunity to learn the Lionheart sword, the legendary skill tree finally unlocked. This Grima must be incredible. He can already feel that too much power is required before starting, and the time to start learning it is still far away. He was so excited that he had been wandering this place since dawn. He's going to practice circulation to calm his mind before class starts, and in his past life, he didn't have a proper system. He learned swordsmanship by stealing it or hearing it. He didn't even have anyone he could call master. This second chance is truly worth living. The gratitude of a man who finally has a proper tutorial. At that moment while he's sitting, Sir Aizen has arrived. A considerable time has passed, but no disturbance has occurred. What would be the trigger for that boy? The soft side of the past is nowhere to be seen. If Aizen had met with his father, he asked if he could be Lucian's swordsmanship master. He thought there was no hope, but upon seeing him again, he noticed he has aspects worth observing. For him, my lord, this will at least serve as brief entertainment. Aizen says that if he's who they say he is, he must not be an ordinary talent. But how could he be just talent? It's more than that. His attitude has surprised him. He'll know what he means when he sees him, and he remained thoughtful, and at that moment he's observing him and begins to laugh. He is Aizen Breitner, Saint of the Sword. It's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, third prince, since His Majesty's birthday years ago. From today I will be your instructor. And immediately he can't believe it. This morning Hans had given him a hint that he would learn sword knowledge from a knight who has served House Baldeck for generations, who was supposed to. If that person turns out to be the sword master. To the third prince he indicates that he wants to conduct the training outdoors and immediately goes outside. It's fine, he'll start right now, but he wants him to wait a moment. If there's been no need to explain, there must be a reason. A disciple receiving instruction only follows the master's words, the wisdom of someone who's been on the wrong end of too many tutorials to question the first step, because he already suspected the true goal of this run is to measure his qualities as a disciple, that is, to evaluate the seed. They use similar methods even when he was a mercenary group leader. They give a novice a task that seems trivial, and just by his reaction and attitude, you can learn a lot about him. He kept running. He showed a pretty good mindset with his response. Now only one thing remains, tenacity. He'll run until he faints. 1 hour later, our protagonist doesn't know what's happening with him. He's been running for a good while and doesn't feel tired at all. Rather, the more he runs, the more his body seems to become even lighter. Until now, the only thing he's done to regain his strength is drink that packaged nectar. All the exercise he's done has just been walking. He doesn't know what's happening right now. The confusion of a man who just discovered he's been running on premium fuel. Sir Aizen is surprised. The reason he made him run was only to assess his overall condition. He didn't have high expectations of his physical abilities. However, this is unreasonable. Not a single drop of sweat flows from his body. His breathing remains calm like a tranquil lake. Any knight who has trained their mana for so long wouldn't easily maintain this, but it can't be. He is surprised and immediately steps in front of our protagonist. This is enough, I want you to stop running now. He doesn't know what's happened, but this one handles mana. Aizen asks the third prince that he wants to ask him a question. This morning, what he did to calm his mind was a cycle, not meditation. Lucian asks if he's referring to what happened on the training field, and yes, it was indeed a cycle. There's nothing better to organize his thoughts, so for him, his assumption was real. He's going to check his physical condition. If he feels anything strange, he must not move. He immediately touches him and feels a flow. He didn't expect this. He has already reached the same end of the cycle as him. This is surprising. That's not the end. He is opening a path beyond the level he reached. This child is opening a new path, and he is surprised by what he observes. The moment a grandmaster realizes his new student isn't just talented, he's a once-in-a-millennium anomaly that breaks all the rules.